Yep.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar from Annika Digital. It's myself and Stanley. I'm assisting Martin Jones. Hi, Martin.
Hi.
Martin is going to introduce himself and go straight into his deck, which is all about experiments you should be running in Google Ads. I'm going to turn my camera off. You will get the video later on if you've joined the webinar, and if you're watching on catch up, that's great. So over to you, Martin. If you could just share your screens and make sure that I can see everything okay.
Yep.
I'll turn my camera off, but I'll keep my mic on just for a second.
Cool. Yep. So I'm sharing screen now. Hope everyone can see that.
Yes.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I guess welcome to what I hope will be a very useful webinar for you. So I'm going to cover the topic on the screen. So if you're here for another topic, you're going to be sadly disappointed, I'm afraid. I'm not going to teach you to tame tigers or anything like that. You're in the wrong webinar. But yeah, my topic is going to be, I'm going to be covering experiments you should be running in Google Ads. And yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm a senior paid media account manager at Annika. I joined Annika in March 2024. But I've been working agency side for like the last 6 years, but I've been in digital marketing for over a decade now. Wow. Yeah. Over a decade. Time flies. But there you go. I work with clients from the pitch to the day-to-day management, from international growth and scaling. So basically every stage I work with clients. I've worked across multiple verticals and industries, with large enterprise to SME and startups. I've also worked freelance before and in-house. So yeah, a range of different experiences. But yeah, and I guess humble bragging, I've got a track record of gaining results for clients from e-commerce to SaaS. And I've kind of been instrumental in helping achieve multiple agency awards throughout my career. So that's enough bragging, though. I think, yeah, you're here for the webinar, not to know about me. A little bit about Annika. I don't think all of you are new to us. I think some of you will know who we are, but I may be fairly new to Annika in terms of just over a year I've been working with them now, but they're not new to me. So I've worked alongside people from Annika before in previous roles, and I've crossed paths with the Annika team and many times at multiple conferences and various events. Annika has been around for 18 years from the digital marketing perspective. We just had our 18th birthday, so yeah, which was really good. If you managed to get to, I don't know if anyone here actually went to Epic, but it was a really good conference for us. There's also other arms to Annika, which encompass sort of the training side, which I know some of you might be DMI students, so you'll be well aware of that. But we also have other arms now that cover like the AI technology exploration and sort of applications of that, as well as also our reporting and insights arm. So, that's enough about Annika as well, I think. But we're doing some pretty clever things, and it's a good time to be with Annika, and it's a good time to sort of basically be listening. I'm basically just trying to prove that we know what we're talking about to you guys, really. So yeah. But enough about the company, enough about me. I'm going to quickly jump into an agenda, what you can expect from this webinar. So yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover what are experiments in Google Ads. Honestly, just to make sure that everyone knows what they are. And then I'm going to go into and cover types of experiments. And then how often, I'm going to answer the question of how often you should aim to run different experiments and give you a rough guide there. And then I'm going to actually show you how to create an experiment in Google Ads. So if you're a complete novice and you've never done it before, you'll be able to do it after this webinar, or at least that's my intention anyway. And then I'll recap and do the key takeaways. So when we get to that stage, if you've listened to nothing else, please just listen to the key takeaways. But I'm sure that won't be the case. Right. Oh, hang on. Oh, there we go. Screen's back. Sorry. So I'm going to jump straight into it. So, this may be self-explanatory to some of you if you've done experiments before and you're currently running experiments, but let's start with what we mean by experiments in Google Ads. So what are they? Well, they're essential is what they are. If I had to put it into one sentence, basically experiments are ways to test changes to your campaigns in as fair a way as possible. and you can review the results and the changes against the original campaign. They also run in tandem with each other if they're set up correctly. Now, some people might say, well, so why do we want them running in tandem? Well, the idea of them running in tandem is to eliminate the impact of seasonality and other factors in search trends. So, for example, and just off the top of my head, if you're on a sale campaign in sort of November, December time, and compared it to data from the same sale campaign in July and August, you're likely not going to get fair usable results because seasonality has a huge role to play there, particularly if you're, for instance, if you're selling Christmas trees, you're not going to get any sales in July and August. But, that's sort of like an extreme example. But we want to ensure the data we get from an experiment has usable insights that we can utilize to improve our campaigns, because after all, that's exactly why we're doing them. But anyway, let's look at what types of experiments you can run. So what types of experiments are there available in Google Ads? Quite a few is the honest answer. But thankfully, they are broken down into a few umbrella categories. So I'll go through those. So the first one I'm going to mention is ad variations. Now, simply put, these are variations to your ad copy or landing page. You can use these to update specific text, find and replace text with something else, or change a landing page URL. So, and more importantly, again, going back to the more important angle of this and why we would do it this way is you can do this whilst monitoring the impact it has on your ads performance. Ad variations testing is pretty essential. There is no real excuse not to be doing it. I've heard excuses before from clients and other people. There's no real excuse not to be doing it. Google makes it quite easy to see which elements of your ads are underperforming. So you could just replace them with something else and run an experiment to see how it goes. Because the amount of accounts I've audited where there isn't regular ad variant testing still shocks me, even now, because it's such a quick and easy thing to test. And it can have a big impact on your campaign performance, particularly if it's done consistently. But yeah, that covers ad variations. If there are any questions, I'm sure Anne will stop me if there's anything she can't answer. But yeah, I'll jump on to the next one. Second one I want to talk about is PMax experiments. Now, I'm sure lots of people have heard about Performance Max. This is a type of experiment that lets you test Performance Max against other campaign types, or you can test specific Performance Max features within a Performance Max campaign, so such as final URL expansion or automatically generated assets, etc. Now, again, you should be testing your Performance Max campaigns.
Could you just explain what final URL expansion and automated generation? Because a lot of people won't have seen a webinar on Performance Max and may not even know what Performance Max is. So you might just have to explain that. Sorry, Martin.
You jumped ahead of me, and I was going to. Don't worry. But yeah, final URL expansion is effectively allowing Google to expand the URL, the landing pages of where your ads drive the traffic. So, for instance, let's say we've got you have a lot of products within your listing within Performance Max, and you send them to specific pages based on the search. What you're effectively doing with final URL expansion is it's a feature you can just tick on in Performance Max. And what it allows Performance Max to do is, if it thinks there's a better landing page or a better variation of that product that will get you a higher conversion rate, it will send the traffic to that page instead. So you do have to monitor it because it's Google. It's putting your hands, like the trust in the hands of Google, which is not my favorite thing to do all the time. But that's effectively what final URL expansion is. And automatically generated assets and images is allowing Google to use its AI to create improved images for search and display, basically. But rather annoyingly, but I will show you how to do this a little later on. But I also want to add here, basically, rather annoyingly for me, is that final URL expansion and automatic asset expansion is something we've tested quite extensively. And as much as it annoys me to give Google props for their automated assets, because some of them can be terrible, in every case, the evidence points to it performing better. So my recommendation has to be you should test it too. which annoys me a little bit because sometimes they're terrible. And you know, you have to weigh it up of, do we want more control over the image generated and the landing page that we send them to, or do we want the better performance? I'd argue in most cases you want the better performance. But yeah, let's move on to the next one because I'm not giving Google any more credit. Video experiments. So this involves comparing different videos within the same YouTube campaign. So you can customize this to test across multiple video campaigns and test various variables such as the bidding strategy rather than just the video itself as well. It seems kind of self-explanatory, but if you're lucky enough to have multiple videos to test, then do it. Don't just run them randomly. Put them to work gathering you additional data so you can optimize. That's video experiments in a nutshell, basically. Demand gen. So this is effectively involves testing 2 existing demand gen campaigns. If you've not run demand generation campaigns, what they are is they're a mix between they're very good for lead gen. They're a mix between a more automated search, but also a display campaign where you can run lead forms, and they run on the display networks and the search networks. Maybe should do something covering demand gen. Actually, I'll maybe put a blog together or something like that. Anzi is probably pricked up there. I was like, right, that's Martin committing to a blog. But demand gen experiments, you can test them against each other, and you can test campaign goals, strategy targets, ads themselves, and even a new structure or different targeting within them. If you aren't currently running demand gen, then I recommend you start by creating one. Just to test it and let it gather data for a few weeks. And then within like sort of 4 weeks or whenever you can see that data, depending on your traffic, then create a second one to test the various elements against each other. But I'll move on to the next one. So the last one available to us in Google Ads from a direct umbrella category is custom experiments. I tend to use custom experiments a lot, as you could probably imagine, and that's because of their flexibility. As the name suggests, it's a custom experiment, and you know, we primarily use them if we're testing multiple changes at once, or don't want to be confined by the parameters of the other experiment umbrellas. And you can edit any and nearly all aspects of the campaign basically with a custom experiment. I'll just pause in case there's any questions.
No, it's fine. All I did was I just defined for the people that don't know anything about Google Ads what Performance Max was and what demand generation was. But no, we're okay at the moment. I also said about the fact that conversation we had before we started, that landing page experiments, which you'd expect to be a specific experiment type, they're not actually run as a specific experiment type, are they?
No, they're not. So they sit under, I mean, you can test them under custom experiments, you can test them under Performance Max, and you can test them under and variations. It's but they're all different types. It's Google trying to make things a bit more complicated, I think.
Yeah, I only wrote the last one, which was add variations, but of course you can do it for the others as well.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to maybe comment that Performance Max ads, which have been around for nearly 5 years now, there's I think 4 years maybe, their scopes increase massively, isn't it? And if you do Google Ads, it's quite easy to fall into doing them, irrespective of what your objective is. Do you want to just explain the types of ads that you can run with Performance Max and when they show? Because I think people need to understand that it's likely that you'll end up using them.
You will definitely end up using them. Yeah. So Performance Max is effective. I mean, when it burst onto the scene, I think about 4.5 years ago, we immediately hated them. But that's because they replaced smart shopping, and every marketer I knew, particularly in paid media, was very fond of smart shopping because we got all the automation and all of the data, whereas Performance Max gave us all that automation but no data.
And no control.
And no control, which is a big thing. Yeah. So Performance Max effectively it's a campaign. It's an all-encompassing campaign type in Google Ads. It will run on every network that Google has available. So it will run the shopping campaigns for you. It will run the shopping listings on the shopping network. It will run search. It'll run display, and it runs video as well. And it'll also do so in some of the other areas of display, like Gmail and stuff like that, which you get from demand gen. So that's effectively what Performance Max is. And it's good. I mean, when it first started, it was terrible for lead generation, but it's definitely got a lot better since then. And now even they're starting to give us more data as well. So when it first started, we had to get a lot of scripts in order to pull out just what
Just explain what a script is, because people won't know what scripts are as well.
Okay, so a script is effectively an automated bit of code that will pull out specific information for you from Google Ads. So we plug them in as a bulk update, and they will run it whenever we want them. We can schedule them, or they'll just run once. And it's just a bit of automation that will pull out specific data that you need. So,
and most people won't need to run scripts. It's only really when you're running an agency like we are, and we're having to run very complex and very high budgets. If you're just doing a small budget, you know, you've got £500 a month to spend or something like that, you probably won't need to understand scripts. It's just that if you really want to compete and get more out of your campaigns, or you're in a very competitive market, then scripts become, and that sounds like another webinar as well for the paid team, to be honest. We haven't done one on scripts for a long time.
Right, I'll add it to the notes. I think I'm going to do this.
Anyway, back over to you, because I didn't want to waste too much of your time, but it's just that we get a lot of beginners on our webinars, and it's nice to have them to have the full story, so as we're introducing the concepts, they understand all the words behind it.
Yep. Cool, no problem. And yeah, you are right on scripts. Most people don't need to run them. There are some really simple scripts that you can just get directly, and you can get and they can plug in and they can help you, even if you're running small budgets. But I think, yeah, maybe we do another session on that. I'll move on just so I don't get too behind on time. Now there is another one. So there's a bonus experiment not found in Google Ads directly, and I'm mentioning it because it's kind of important. I thought I'd throw this in here because, you know, you need to know about it, particularly if you're in e-commerce, but you don't set it up in the same way you would other experiments. And I'm talking about basically product feed attribute testing. And now this is my favorite type of testing. And that's because I believe from my experience that it has the most direct and immediate impact on your e-commerce performance. So for e-commerce, basically, it's the difference between an optimized product feed and one that isn't, quite frankly. A product feed, in case you're unaware, is when you submit your products to Google via a shopping feed to run on the Google Shopping Network. The data you send them, that is your product feed. So you'll give them titles, you'll give them sizes, you'll give them colors, you'll give them prices, that sort of thing. So what I'm talking about here is really testing those attributes within that feed. You know, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this particular type of testing on this webinar, because again, this would be another one for the list, but it could be its own webinar. You know, so I guess watch this space, because it's probably, I'm going to have a lot of webinars to make after this, I think. But there are multiple product attributes to test, and there are varying ways to test them. So, I mean, just to give you an idea, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but some of these ways include duplicating the feed itself and grouping products separately. So you can achieve a real sort of A/B test, even against the best practice of only having one feed. I've always said this, that the best practice is the practice that works, but when it comes to sort of product feeds, this is the exception to the rule. You know, and you can set these up directly through Google Merchant Center, or you can.
Yeah, I was just going to mention Google Merchant Center, because even if you're not running Google Ads, if you've got an e-commerce website, the advantage of getting a product feed into Google Merchant Center is it can also be used to show the free product listings as well. Definitely. So even some of the stuff that you potentially would talk about in a product feed testing, attribution optimization webinar would apply to people that aren't running ads as well. So
yeah, definitely. But yeah, you can set the feed up in Google Merchant Center, or you can use sort of feed management tools and CSS tools. So CSS is shopping comparison service tools, such as Product Hero, you know, Data Feed Watch, Channable. There are other tools available. I'm not sponsored by any of those, by the way. They're just the first that came to mind. I don't think anyone is going to sponsor me directly. Maybe one day we'll have to try that, won't we, Anne? But what most people do is they test a change to an attribute. And I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but I do think it's important to know, is they'll test a change to an attribute. They'll change it directly or via a supplemental feed. And then they'll use a look back window to see if they saw improved performance for the products they edited. the said attribute on, versus those products' previous performance for the preceding week or month or whatever time period they're looking at, which is a perfectly good and accepted way to do it. I've done it, and I'm not saying it's the wrong. However, I prefer tandem running of products when it comes to product feeds as well, to more accurately test them, which involves, it's a lot more work. It involves feed duplication, feed labeling, item ID changes, and sort of GTIN removal of the testing feed, and an additional campaign setup. So, it is more work, but it gets you more accurate data. And this is,
This is quite an advanced feature then. Most
is,
people aren't doing this, are they? So
no, they're not. So yeah,
definitely, it's larger spends.
mhm.
Probably another webinar we'll do on anything to do with that another day.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I'll move on. I feel like I've talked about this enough. But yeah. So I'm going to answer the question here, basically, how often I should be running experiments. And you'll love the answer. It depends, because we love saying that in marketing. Now, it is the truth, however. So it's entirely dependent on your own specific goals, the traffic volume you get for your account, the performance, as well as the type of experiment. However, I did say at the beginning, I'm of course going to show you a bit of a cheat sheet as a guide, because it'd just be cruel for me not to, wouldn't it, I suppose? So I've put a rough guide here together. So, for your monthly or ongoing experiments, you want to focus on things that gather data faster and are overall less impactful as a single change. Not that they're not impactful, but they are, they're very different to making a huge structure change. So things like ad copy should always be being tested, as it's quite fickle in terms of what ad copy works. What worked 2 months ago for your ad copy might not really resonate anymore with the audience. And, there is so much of it, particularly when you're looking at search campaigns and you've got responsive search ads now with 15 headlines and 4 descriptions. They're really, it's easy to see which elements are the worst performing and should be changed out. So, there's no excuse not to be doing ad copy testing on a regular basis. And other things like keyword URLs. So this is assigning specific product URLs at the keyword level. That's a very good one to test as an ongoing test. And I also don't mean change the same campaign each time, by the way. You can do this on multiple campaigns, or you can do one campaign at a time. If you're worried about sort of maybe fluctuations in performance, if you change all your campaigns and test them all at the same time, you will see fluctuations. But yes, those are the sort of things that I would suggest doing monthly, or an ongoing test where you have a rolling test and you do them every couple of weeks or so, depending on your circumstances. Quarterly, I would say sort of new campaign types. So if you're thinking of testing demand gen against Performance Max, that would be something that I would look at and go, okay, I'll probably do that each quarter, at least a test of that, of some kind like that on each quarterly. And then landing pages and possibly new audiences, they're all pretty fairly good ones to test on a quarterly basis. Again, it doesn't have to be on the same campaign, but if you were putting a testing plan together, say if I was putting a testing plan together for a client, they would generally sit in the quarterly section. And then there's the big ones. So every 6 months plus. So, those are going to be things like bidding strategies, campaign structure changes. So if you're testing new structures, particularly on Performance Max, because what Performance Max tends to do is stagnate if you don't encourage it to perform better, or you don't make changes to it. It will just push the same products, it will push the same ads that are working, because you're not giving it new information to test. So I'd also put larger match type experiments every 6+ months kind of thing. So things like testing exact match against broad match, that definitely shouldn't be done too often. And then I guess other things such as geolocation testing, although that's usually on an ad hoc basis, because if you're expanding into a new territory or a new country, that tends to happen when it happens. But if you have a planned expansion, and I would have a new territory every 6 months and test that. That's a rough guide. And again, I have to add the caveat of it will likely also depend on your individual accounts, sort of the volume of traffic that you see, as well as what your goals are. I hope that's made things a little bit clearer. I'll pause in case there's any questions. Are there any questions, Anne?
No, nothing at the moment.
Cool. I hope everyone's still with me. I've not lost them. But yeah. So I'll move on to basically how do we actually create experiments in Google Ads. So I want to show you how to actually create an experiment. If you know already, then great, but I'm still going to show you anyway. You're just going to have to get through it. So the first step is basically you need to decide what you want to test, because that will determine the type of experiment you will set up. I mean, simple enough, right? But you need to know what you're testing before you build an experiment. Once you know what you want to test, you need to go into Google Ads to set up the experiment. And you'll find experiments in this area under the campaigns drop down on the left-hand navigation menu. So if you're familiar with Google Ads, you'll know where this is. If you're not familiar with Google Ads, that's where you can find it. And for our purposes, I'm just going to show you the steps for a custom experiment. Just not anything too specific, but just to give you a general idea of the steps involved and what you can expect and how you fill them in. So I go to the experiments tab here and I click the big blue plus symbol at the top left there of the campaigns, and it takes me to the next step, which looks like this. So now I'm setting up a custom search campaign test. So I select custom experiment and then search, not display, and I press continue. So far so good. Then it takes me to this step where you give your experiment a name and a description if you like. Descriptions are optional, but if you want to add a description, please do. I would recommend a name that follows your naming convention, but also makes sense to you so you can identify it easily. Sorry, Anne. Yeah, was that to me, Anne? Sorry, to expand the screen.
Yeah, it was to the audience because it's a little bit small for them to see. If they hover in the top right of the black window, there's two arrows which will make it full screen, and then you'll be able to see the screenshot a little bit better. So
okay,
no sorry, that wasn't meant for you. Well, no, was meant for the users.
I just wanted to make sure everyone could see it. If it was a me error, I'll sort it. Okay, yeah, where was I? Yeah, the naming convention. Make sure it makes sense to you so it's easier for you. And then you'll also need to select an existing campaign to be the control for the test. And then append an experiment suffix just to differentiate them, basically. So it's just something at the end of the experiment that will tell it apart from the original campaign. Then you go to the next step, and this will open a test campaign as if you've created a brand new campaign. So here you can set up your test by making changes, and I'll add here, don't be tempted to make hundreds of changes. Only make changes that you want to test. So for example, if you were going to test bidding strategies against each other, you only really want to change that one element because you want that to be the only difference between the original campaign and the trial campaign. So when you look at the performance, if it's the bidding strategy that drove or didn't drive the change in results. So you go in here, you make the changes you need to, and then when you've made your changes, you need to scroll up and click schedule. A blue button says schedule at the top of the campaign creation, and it'll take you to the final step. So there are multiple steps on this page. So the first one you need to do is select two key goals. So these will be the goals that Google Ads uses to determine the success of your experiment. And although you can only select two key metric goals, you will be able to see all the other metrics so that you don't select. So you don't have to worry about that. You will still see them, just Google won't use them to determine the success of the experiment. But you can still use them to determine the success of the experiment, excuse me. But Google Ads will only use the goals you've selected to say this is a success or it's a failure, etc. The second step is decide on an experiment split. So this is where you determine the original campaign's proportion of traffic and budget to assign to the new experiment campaign. Now, to have a completely fair test, I would say keep it at 50-50, so 50%. So half will go to the test and half stays with the control. There are instances where you wouldn't do that. I would recommend that is what you do. But the instances when you wouldn't do that is, let's say, if you were, you knew, for instance, that your original campaign had additional products and it required more budget in order to push those, for instance, but you wanted to test a specific subset of products on the secondary campaign. But it gets a bit complicated when you do that. For most purposes and for most experiments setting up, you would have a 50-50 split because it's a fair test. And then on the third step, you select the start and end dates for your experiment. And when you're selecting the date ranges, make sure you give your experiment enough time to be able to make statistically significant findings. And this will depend on what you're testing and how much traffic you receive. So for example, if you're testing conversion uplift and you get 100 conversions a day on a campaign, you're likely to see significant relevant data after maybe a week. But I would always default to sort of at least 4 weeks for most experiments. If you have lower traffic and you don't see a large influx of clicks or conversions or whatever it is you're testing, then give yourself even longer, 6 to 8 weeks. And just to make it clear, you can always end an experiment early if you see positive results sooner than the scheduled end date. So you don't have to, just because you've set it up for 8 weeks, for instance, you don't have to wait until the end of the 8 weeks. If you can see every metric is better on the trial campaign, you can hit apply and end that experiment early. You don't have to wait. And then the fourth area is you have a decision to make. I would encourage you to enable sync. Now, this basically means that any changes made to the control campaign will automatically be copied over to the trial campaign. So if you change an ad, for instance, on the control campaign, or you increase its budget, that will do exactly the same for the trial campaign and keep it fair. Now, for most cases, you're going to have sync enabled. There are some reasons not to have sync enabled, so such as if you're testing 2 things at a time to determine an impactful change during an experiment. So I've just seen your question, Daniel. So yeah, I'll answer that. It's an 80% confidence interval. So it doesn't matter on the number of conversions. It matters on the difference between the original and the experiment. But Google will highlight that to you when you click into the experiment once it's set up. But it's an 80% confidence interval. And then the final stage is 5. You click create experiment, and then what to do now. Basically, after that, it's what do you do next. So you monitor it and you analyze the results. So now your experiment is created. You can click on it and see the metrics for both the control and the trial. Google Ads actually, uncharacteristically, makes it easy to view this and see the difference between the metrics. And like I just said to you, Daniel, once it reaches an 80% confidence interval level in a metric, it will deem it statistically significant. Now, make it very clear that you shouldn't let your own bias jump in here. There have been times when I know that I'm testing that what I'm testing should perform better, and it just doesn't. And it used to drive me crazy. But I had to remind myself that I'm not just trying to prove the change is better. I'm also at the same time trying to prove it's not better. So either is fine with me because it means we know more than we did before the test. So basically, just remember it's a win-win for you, regardless of the results. That if you even though everything I've done it before, where I know the bidding strategy should be better, all the previous experiments I've done with previous clients or previous campaigns shows that it should be better, but then I run it on one campaign and it just isn't. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But that's okay. That's fine. It doesn't have to be. If it doesn't behave the way you expect, and sometimes they don't, that's okay, because that's the whole point of testing. Right. Oh, I actually think I'm a bit ahead, but I wanted to cover, I guess, if there are any questions first before I just jump into key takeaways.
No? Sorry, Martin, carry on. I'm just, I just had an inbound call. You carry on.
No problem. Yeah, so key takeaways really is sort of nearing the end of this presentation. I've actually made really, really good time, which is, unusual for me. I tend to have to rush. So I'll make sure that I answer any questions on these and go through them as much as possible. So what are the key things to remember from all the talking I've just done? So, I mean, firstly, experiments are essential to optimizing for anyone managing Google Ads. They really are the difference between um, they really are the difference between having optimized campaigns and not. They do make a huge difference. It's particularly when you put them in a plan and you do them regularly. Even things like ad copy, doing that regularly will mean your ads are just constantly being tested, constantly be optimized, so that eventually, if you look at them in 6, 7, 8 months, or even a year, your ads are going to be completely different to your competitors' ads if they're not testing. And then the second point is to test one thing or a few controlled things at a time. So don't go crazy testing everything at once, or you won't know what drove the change in results. Remember, the goal of the experiment is to understand what we can change to improve the results, and what impacts the results the most. So if you make lots of changes on a campaign, you're then guessing what it actually was. Be brief and be controlled on what you're testing. Don't test every single metric and every single change you can at the same time. It really won't help you, because you still have no idea what actually drove the results. So you'll have just wasted however many weeks you ran that test for, because you still have no actionable insights to apply to the campaign. Test regularly is the third sort of key takeaway, but follow the guidelines on what elements to test more frequently than others. So ad copy, for example, can be tested a lot more often than bidding strategies can. If you start testing your bidding strategy every month, you're really just going to have your campaigns in a constant state of learning, which is not going to help your performance. Whereas ad copy, because there is so much of it, particularly on search campaigns, you're more than welcome to test that every month, because there is 2 or 3 or 4 headlines that are the worst performers every single week, and you can change them out. So yeah, just remember what to test and follow that guidance. Ensure you allow enough time for your experiments to gather results. This is kind of crucial. There is no point running experiments if you don't let them do what they're supposed to do. If you cut them off too early, or you just let them run indefinitely, it doesn't make any sense to do that. Let them run for enough time until which you see the results you're happy with, and you go, right, this is the better campaign. Don't be tempted to cut them off or end them too early, because things can change from week to week. You might set up a test one day, and the first week, the trial looks like it's going to win. And it's like, oh, it's doing really, really great. All the metrics are higher, but it hasn't got to that 8% confidence interval yet. And then the second week, it dies off and the original takes over. And then for the next 2 weeks, the original actually works better. That has happened before. So don't be too quick to judgment. Allow the time to run. And again, you don't have to test everything on the same campaign. You can test one change across multiple campaigns, or do one at a time, and then the next month repeat on a new campaign, particularly if you're nervous about current performance fluctuations. When I've had clients who are quite nervous about, okay, what does this test mean for our current performance? Because we like our performance and we don't really want it to impact sales or traffic or leads. I'll go, okay, so let's roll it out as a phased approach. Let's test it on one campaign first, rather than testing it on every campaign you're running. Because then if it doesn't work, it lessens that impact. But it is something that, and most people know they have to be doing it now. When I speak to clients, it's sort of a foregone conclusion that they should be testing something. It used to be a very difficult conversation, but I think it's got a lot easier over the years now, particularly that we can now point to the evidence and say, here's what we've done over the last couple of years. We've tested this extensively on multiple verticals across multiple clients and multiple campaigns. And, it really is better. So here's the evidence for saying that you should be testing, or you're going to be left behind by your competitors, really. Because if they are testing and you're not, they're going to be ahead of you. And then just finally, I want you to remember, some tests don't behave like you think they will. So it doesn't matter if your test fails. That's why it's a test, or fails, or doesn't do what you expect it to do. Remember, you're trying to prove it or disprove it. It doesn't matter which. You win either way because you know more than you did before the beginning of the test. So if it doesn't work, despite how infuriating it may be, you've still learned something. You're still ahead of where you were, which is good. And that is everything from me. Thank you. Thank you for listening, guys. I hope it's been helpful. I finished a little early, Anne, which is unlikely.
Hi guys, thank you very much, Martin. I think we probably answered the questions as we went along. Yeah, Dan, you asked a question about how many conversions roughly should we wait for before data is reliable. Did you answer that one?
I did, yeah. So it's an 80% confidence interval. I can see another one. So from your experience, which experiment type have you had the most success with? From my experience, well, product feed attributes. So for e-commerce clients, those are the ones that make the biggest impactful changes that I've seen. But we've seen success from every type. It's just a matter of, constantly testing them within reason. And making the changes that we think are going to be incremental and improve the campaign. So there's no experiment type that is better than others because they all do different things. So it is definitely worth testing them all, but not at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the science in that, scientists sort of control experiment and making sure that you've got enough data to make a decision, really. So if you haven't got huge amounts of data, then you can only test the really big things and see what the impact is. And obviously ads, I mean, we tend to have 2 or 3 ads running at any time anyway, don't we?
Yeah.
Let me just bring up a little, if you guys would like to thank Martin or you enjoyed the presentation today, if you'd like to give Martin a review, that would be amazing. So you can just click here to give Martin a review. That goes through across to digital reviews. It's actually over 600 now. I'm going to redo this week. It's just annoying me that it's we never get around to changing it. I just want to talk a little bit about next week. We're going to be doing a 2-hour special on educating you on how to do AI and use AI. So it's going to be how to take a transcription from, something like one of the tools, Read It or Tactic, or one of the tools that you have in your browser, or even a file from Google or Teams, and convert that into really good meeting notes. And we're going to show you different techniques to do that. So that's next Friday. We've also got quite a lot. Martin mentioned Epic, which was our e-commerce conference that we ran last week. If you want to go onto the website, you can get all the slides, but all the presenters have agreed to do a series of webinars over the summer. So we've got a sort of an Epic special for July and August. So please come along and watch those as well. But if that's all we need to talk about, have a brilliant weekend. And thank you very much, Martin. Great as usual. And we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.